Did you ever shoot an image and think that, oh, I wish I had a little more red information or blue information or HA or O3 or whatever, because there was some structure or color within that specific range of the image that was just overpowered by the other information in the image? Well, you can actually get that extra information into your image, often with what you already have. And if you're planning to shoot more integration time to add to your image, that's better, but this is a good workaround till then. This image of IC405, the Flaming Star Nebula, is a good example of what I'm talking about. It was shot with a Player 1 Aries M monochrome camera using the Sony IMX533 sensor and ZWO LRGB filters from Dark Skies. And this represents 9.5 hours of integration time. In my opinion, it needs about twice that to be finished. Because of that, the white filamentous region, which is the reflection nebula, is weak compared to the much stronger and much broader red regions of the image. I want to improve this image by doubling down specifically on the blue-white filamentous regions in the upper left quadrant. Right now, that area looks more gray-white, but there's a tinge of blue in there that I want to bring out. And the region is soft right now, and I want to enhance its detail as well. Fortunately, I already have the information to do this, and it's been pre-segregated by the LRGB filters. These are the original LRGB masters after calling and stacking as presented in PixInsight. The luminance master you can see is the most filled out image because it's shot with a clear filter that allows all the red, green, and blue light to pass through it. And even though I've done no processing yet to it, other than running the screen transfer function to stretch the histogram and make the nebula bright enough that we can see it well. Going in clockwise order, the top right is the red master, the lower right is the blue master, and the lower left is the green master. I'm going to selectively remove the luminance master so that we can really focus our attention on the segregated information. Take a look at each of the images and compare that to the color background image shown here. The filter colors segregate which frequencies of light are admitted to the sensor and reflects the composition of the nebula at different areas because different materials reflect and emit light differently. The red master reveals much of the background structure within the Flaming Star Nebula. The blue master on the lower left really brings out and distinguishes the reflective part of the nebula, which appears to wrap itself in the form of something like amorphous vines over the top of the Flaming Star Nebula's background. And the green filter, as is often the case, carries much of the information that will translate into brightness within the image. But while the green color does carry a lot of the brightness, we aren't going to use it because it is affected by both the red ranges and the blue ranges. And we just want information that will precisely enhance the blue-white nebulous filaments. Now, our eyes produce color by combining red, green, and blue. Not exactly, but that's good enough for government work. It's good enough for the example here. Our eyes combine red, green, and blue channels to make color. This is also how we make color with monochrome cameras. So I've just now combined the red, green, and blue masters, and we will derive our color image. I'm going to name it RGB LF for red, green, and blue, and it was color balanced using the linear fit tool, and now I've activated the screen transfer function so we can see what it looks like. This original master isn't bad. There's a lot of good information, especially in the red regions, and there's also good information in the bluish regions. The brighter cloud structure up around AERIGA toward the upper left of the image. The stars are really dominating the perception of this image though, and there is a lot more information there behind the very bright stars. This nebula is dim and subtle, so let's go ahead and remove the stars and take a better look. I'll just run the star exterminator to extract them out. I'm sure you'll be amazed at how clear the image becomes without any further editing once the stars are extracted from the image. Human perception is naturally drawn to bright things, so whether or not we realize it, and even if we are trying to pay attention to the nebula in the background, our perception remains most focused on the brighter parts of the image. When the stars are extracted from the background, however, we can really see what's going on in there. Without any further editing and just with the screen transfer function's relatively crude histogram stretch, we can nonetheless see a great deal of detail revealed within this image. When the histogram is stretched and balanced a little more, and the contrast adjusted and the saturation turned up slightly, this image, all by itself, would make a beautiful image. But you can probably also see that compared to the enormous amounts of red coloration within the image, the bluish-white structures are weak. I've saved the luminance in RGB masters as 16-bit lossless TIFFs and brought them over into Affinity Photo. There is the pure RGB information. Let's go ahead and add the luminance information to it now to help fill out the image. I'll turn on the luminance layer and set it for the luminosity composite mode. It is usually beneficial to composite the luminance to the RGB plates using the luminosity composite mode because it brings the information together in a balanced fashion, respecting the bright areas and the dark areas so the brights are not blown out and the darks are not crushed. Now we see the makings of a very good image here, but even with no other development done other than the histogram being stretched on the luminance and RGB masters and then having them composited together to combine their information, we can still see that there is an enormous amount of red information, there's a lot of good blue information, but it's a little weak in comparison. Those bluish white clouds are so beautiful, and I want to make sure in the final image they really stand out. But there is only a little information in the blue range compared to the red range. If I were to just increase saturation, I would end up clipping things. And likewise, if I were to just frequency separate this image, and then run tools like the unsharp mask, the clarity tool, and the high pass filter on the high frequency information, I could easily sharpen up the detail in the bluish white regions of the image. But because the blue-white information is weaker than the red information, it will require a different degree of sharpening. The weaker the information in an area, the more vulnerable it is to overuse of sharpening tools. So the problem is there's a red versus blue information imbalance. How do we fix that in such a way as to bring out the blue-white filament's sharpness and color without it being deleterious to the rest of the image? Well, fortunately, the information within this image has been segregated by the LRGB filters that were used to shoot the image. So we're going to pop back into PixInsight, and then we're going to run that blue master through the blue channel combination tool all by itself. This will give us a master with the low and high frequency information from the blue filter only, and add the blue color to that master so that we can apply it later. After the master is made, we have to stretch the histogram. And since we're producing a purely blue master, it's going to be pretty much impossible to do this manually by eye, which is the way that I usually like to stretch my histograms using the evolved histogram stretching technique that I've covered in other videos. So I'm just going to apply the screen transfer function's automated histogram stretch to the image by selecting the blue master, dragging the little triangle from the lower left of the screen transfer function tool, bottom center right, onto the little triangle, which is an action icon, by the way, of the histogram transformation tool, and that sets the screen transfer function's histogram stretch in the histogram tool. And then I apply the histogram tool to the blue master, and that sets the histogram. Then I run the noise then star exterminators. And because the histogram has already been stretched, I need to have unscreened stars selected in the star exterminator. The star exterminator will do a better job with stretched images if the unscreen option is checked. The star exterminator will produce a blue star plate, but we do not need it, so I'm just going to get rid of it. With the stars gone, we now just have all that lovely blue information of the nebula. And you're probably thinking, okay, so what do you do with that? Shortly, it's going to be added to the LRGB information of the image of IC405 that I have been developing. Now we're back in Affinity Photo because we really need a layer-based photo editor to do this technique well. Layer-based photo editors allow a person to quickly and easily select specific information for editing, or take entire layers and tailor for best effect how that information is added to the rest. Now I'm going to bring in the blue master and prepare it for usage. This begins by using the frequency separation tool to tear the master into its high and low frequency components. Drag the pixel slider bar all the way to the right and separate out all the high frequency information from this blue master. Remember, that's where our detail is. For now, I'm going to make the low frequency layer invisible because we don't need it for a while. For now, we just want the detail in the high frequency information. What this does is takes the sharpness information from that high frequency layer, which is specific to the blue regions of the image, and adds that once again to the image, literally doubling down on the sharpness in the blue areas. Now I'm going to temporarily make that blue master's high frequency information invisible, so I can focus on improving the main image. I'll start by merging the separate L and RGB masters to make a new combined pixel layer. This is done by temporarily making all the information we don't want at this time invisible, then right-click and select Merge Visible from the right-click menu, and this will give us a new layer that I'll just temporarily name LRGB Pix. But first, to keep things tidy, I'll merge the original L and RGB layers into a new group and just call them base masters because they contain our original information, and essentially get that out of the way. It'll be there for later in case we should need it. I don't think we will, but I don't like to discard old layers unless I'm sure I no longer need them. Now I'm going to destroy that new LRGB Pix layer by frequency separation, dividing it into its high and low frequency information, and then I'm going to run Synergistic sharpening on the high frequency information to get the best possible sharpness out of that image. Now I have a couple videos where I go into the concept of Synergistic sharpening in detail. Just look up Synergy or Synergistic sharpening, should pull it right up. But in a nutshell, synergistic sharpening uses the various sharpening tools of a layer-based photo editor like Affinity Photo to the maximum effect by layering their effects on top of each other. You put your tools directly into your high-frequency layer, because that's the only part you want to sharpen, that's where your detail is. Open the unsharp mask first, and draw out the sharpness that you're watching for. Watch for the brighter regions of the image, that's where they have the most effect. You want to increase the sharpness until the image becomes a little crunchy, and then back off just a little bit. And then next, we're going to run the clarity tool, placing the clarity layer over the unsharp mask layer so it adds its effect to the unsharp mask. And then we'll do the same thing with the high pass filter, putting it over the clarity tool so it adds its effect to clarity, which adds both effects to the high pass filter. In this way, the sharpening works together synergistically and gives you the maximum possible benefit to your image. Also, something that stumps a lot of people is the high pass filter seems to make the image look blurry when you first turn it on. For the high pass filter to work well, you have to set its composite mode. With bright earthbound images, that would typically be the linear light composite mode, but with much dimmer astrophotography, I find the soft light composite mode works better. Doing this will only take a moment, mainly because I've done it a million times, so I know exactly what I'm looking for. But the sharpening tools in Affinity Photo, and maybe Photoshop, I don't know, they have a problem. Where the information tends to be weakest, which is right around the edges of images, they tend to make things a little crispy and overdone there. So I like to entirely erase out their effects right near the very edge of the image. Also, dark areas of an image don't have much information, and sharpening tools don't do them any good. In fact, it degrades them. It just makes them look overprocessed and crunchy very, very quickly. So I'm going to deal with that by selecting the unsharp, clarity, and high pass tools, selecting the paintbrush and the black color, which when applied to tools erases their effects from the regions where the painting is done. And I'm just going to erase out the sharpening tools effects from the very edge of the image and also from the dark regions of the image so that we can get the sharpening benefit in the regions of moderate brightness to full brightness and remove it from the areas of darkness, which would be degraded by those sharpening tools. Now I've used the levels tool to increase the brightness and saturation just a little, and now it's time to turn that blue high frequency layer back on. Since that layer only has blue information, its sharpening will mainly affect the blue-white areas of the image. In this way, we can enhance the sharpness of the detail within the blue-white filaments without that process of sharpening bleeding over into the red portion of the image, thereby having deleterious effects on it. Now I want to refine the sharpness of this high-frequency information, just like I did with the high-frequency information from the primary image. This will improve the high-frequency sharpness, maximizing its benefit to the image. And I'm going to use the synergistic sharpening strategy once again, adding in order the unsharp mask, then the clarity tool, then the high pass filter to the blue high-frequency information. Going through the entire synergistic sharpening process only takes a couple minutes with a little experience. Once I am done with that, just like before, I'll open up the paintbrush tool and set it for black and paint out the influence of those sharpening tools over the edges and the dark regions of the image. Now it's time to add that blue low frequency information back into the image to help bring out some of the color in those whitish clouds, which is not there yet because we just don't have enough integration time yet. So to add it back, I'll just turn on the blue low frequency layer and set it for the light and color composite mode. It's good for adding color information without blowing out bright areas or crushing dark areas. I've also removed the unnecessary layers since they were a memory hog. But it does leave blue lingering in the darkest areas. That's no problem, it's easy to remove. We'll just open the levels tool, select the blue channel, and increase the black point. This will remove traces of blue in the moderate bright areas. And I'll further tighten that down by increasing the gamma, which will further restrict the blue to only brighter areas of the image. And that last lingering blue in the darkest areas is best easily and quickly removed with a masking brush. Now the RGB information has been reinforced with another layer of blue. And by dividing up that layer into its high and low frequency constituents and adding them separately, the problems presented by each set of information could be individually addressed, so it could be cleanly added back to the image. Now we can produce an LRGB master which has good red, and the weaker areas in the blue-white filaments have been reinforced. This new LRGB master can then be put through final development to bring out the colors, improve the contrast and clarity of the information, get rid of the noise, and then finally add the star master back to the image. There are many ways to go about that finished developing. I prefer to do it in Photolab 8, which is a great photo developer for all kinds of images and works extraordinarily well with astrophotography. This video isn't really about the finished developing, nor how to use Photolab 8, but I'll give you a very quick synopsis of how I do it. In Affinity Photo, I run Noise Exterminator on the final image. Then I open Photolab 8 and balance the lighting, often with DxO Smart Lighting, which intelligently balances the light throughout an image with a lot of contrast like this, and then I use the tone slider bars to further balance the brightness. Touch-ups with the Curves tool can also have a very powerful effect on this part of the process, especially with the way that good use of the Curves tool can influence and enhance the balance of color throughout the image. Using curves, I'll selectively draw down the green channel over the red and raise it over the blue, which will help enrich the reds while turning the blues into those beautiful ceruleans that we see with the Hubble color palette. This is easily accomplished in Photolab 8 due to its ability to pick the specific range of the red, green, and blue channels or luminance channel or global channels that you want to work on. I can then pop over to the Color tab, select the red range and saturate it just a little, and then select the blue range specifically and saturate it a little as well. Then, using Photolab 8's very powerful Clearview Plus tools and its various contrast adjustments tools, especially the fine adjustment, I can further enhance the sharpening and detail to be found within this image. And by using the advanced features, I can restrict that sharpening out of the darker regions of the image because, as noted earlier, you don't want to sharpen darker regions of an image, or they will become gritty because there is not enough information there to do that. That was the lion's share of the adjustment. I did more fine refinements as well. But this really isn't a video on how to use Photolab 8. I have made a couple so far, and if you would like to see more videos on it, it's a superb, really unrecognized, but superb astrophotography and development tool. So let me know if you want to see more, and I'll be happy to make them. For myself, I only added Photolab 8 just a few months ago to my workflow, but at this point I consider it absolutely indispensable for getting the best possible images. When the finished developing is completed in Photolab 8, it is exported back into Affinity Photo where the star plate is added back. I use a somewhat unique method, I think, for putting star plates back into images. I duplicate the star plate and the lower layer I screen in and use the Curves tool to decrease the power of the stars so they fit the image better. It's quite easy. And in the plate above, I color dodge composite that star plate into the image and once again use the Curves tool or sometimes transparency slider bar to adjust the influence of the color dodge plate. What I find is this gives the stars a nice twinkle and luster. It keeps the stars from coming out looking kind of flat and lifeless like what sometimes happens in images because we have to mute the stars so that we can really emphasize the background nebulosity. And I find this little addition to the process, putting a muted color dodge plate of the stars in over the screen plate, just gives the stars a kind of sparkle like we would see them through a telescope or in the night sky with our own eyes. If you want to see more about that, take a look at my video, How to Get Radiant Stars That Don't Overwhelm an Image. I need to make a new video on that process because the process has evolved a bit since I first created it. It's a little more refined now and versatile for different types of photographic situations. And then finally, we get our completed image. An image that has been color and light balanced, the contrast is adjusted, clarity has been developed, brightness and shadow have been balanced to show as much of the image as possible, and especially that weaker blue-white area of the image was emphasized by taking the blue master, applying the natural blue coloration to it that we would get out of the channel combination tool, frequency dividing that master into its high and low frequency components, and then adding those components back to the image separately so that we can add that information back to the master image in such a way that it does not create artifacts. If you're new to astrophotography, I apologize. You probably found this video confusing. Like I put in the title, this is something I really consider an expert level of development. And I approached the video assuming the viewer already knew the fundamentals of development to at least the moderate level. But either way, whether you're new or a long-time image developer, thank you for taking the time to watch and I hope you learned something. And if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments section below. Have a blast in 2025 getting out there and shooting the sky.